Have you noticed that this show doesn't have any commercials? I'm not selling you diapers or vitamins or smoothies or gasoline. That's because I don't want any corporate sponsors telling me what I can investigate or what I can say. Instead, you are our sponsors. This is a production by our nonprofit, the Informed Consent Action Network. So if you want more investigations, if you want landmark legal wins, if you want hard-hitting news, if you want the truth, go to icandecide.org and donate now. All right, everyone, we ready?
Yeah! Let's do this.
Action. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are out there in the world. I'm in Sardinia, Italy. Hello, everybody. I am here in Utopia almost. It's called Sardinia. I'm surrounded by olive trees, wine vineyards, orchards with peaches and pears, and we've been eating some of the most amazing, clean, beautiful food you could ever imagine, and also drinking some of the local wines, but not today, not for the show. We're completely sober and ready to have a great time to share with you what it's been like to travel Italy, to be screening our film, An Inconvenient Study, to a brand new audience. And then I've also had the opportunity to sit down with doctors, scientists, and media experts that were here in the epicenter of COVID. Remember when it was all a panic and everyone freaked out and it looked like everyone's dying in Italy? Well, they were in the middle of it, and I'm going to share with you what I've learned through this incredible investigation we've been on here in Italy. But first, for a feeling of what this amazing trip has been like, take a look at this. We're in front of the Colosseum in Rome. Day one in Milan. We're in Sardinia, heading to Padua. Just arrived in Venice. Are we rolling? Just finished a radio station here in Italy. We've been told vaccines do not cause autism.
I'm proud to give testimony of it.
Great thing to do.
Good.
Thank you so much.
In about 2 minutes, the doors are going to open up. There's hundreds of people out there waiting to come in and watch An Inconvenient Study. Perhaps did not want to take it, but felt forced.
An Inconvenient Study.
Only each one of us can stop this by using our voice. I absolutely did just have the best meal. Okay, thank you.
A really lovely way to see Italy.
Amo the high wire.
Well, it's just been an absolutely spectacular trip. The reception to An Inconvenient Study has been really amazing, and we're going to get to some of the most powerful interviews I think I've done throughout the experience of Highwire, and I'm going to show you where a couple of things have actually changed my perspective of what happened during COVID. But first I want to talk about something that happened while I was here. There was a post that Robert Kennedy Jr. put out that I took a little issue with, and every once in a while I feel like I have to speak my truth, and that's what I did. This was his post. Today I signed a targeted PrEP Act declaration to support the development and deployment of medical countermeasures related to Ande virus or Andis virus, which can cause the deadly respiratory illness hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. This action helps remove barriers to research and response efforts while we continue monitoring the recent outbreak linked to the South Atlantic cruise ship. HHS is taking the situation seriously and will continue working to protect public health and support the safe development of potential treatments and countermeasures. You know, I have to be honest, I don't like the PrEP Act. Robert Kennedy Jr., I didn't think like the PrEP Act either, which is why I was so surprised he would sort of celebrate using the PrEP Act to do anything whatsoever. It was eating at me. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to have to speak my truth on this one, as I have Really, even when I was working for him as director of communications, that's what he always expected from me, but this is what I posted. Bobby, I remember so many inspiring strategy discussions during your campaign. Providing liability protection to corporate interests for a virus that killed 3 people out of 7 billion was not one of them. I thought about what I was saying there, and honestly, the truth is that, I want to have some sense of humor about this. We did have so many inspired thoughts, strategies on what Robert Kennedy Jr. could do if he ever found himself in a place of power. Of course, we were thinking president most of the way, but he ended up being HHS secretary. Our entire reason for running him for president was, maybe he'd be able to put someone great in as the HHS secretary. Instead, when he got that position, I've said so many times, it was truly a miracle. I think even better, at least from my perspective, than him being president of the United States. But, there's a lot of people that said they agreed. They were frustrated that he was using the PrEP Act. But I did get braced by a few of our followers and, someone I trust a lot in Dr. Robert Malone. This is what he had to say about my post on X. If you actually read the new declaration, what Kennedy issued is remarkably narrow. It is specifically tied to the Andes virus outbreak associated with the MV Hondius incident and close contacts linked to the chain of transmission. The declaration does not authorize lockdowns. It does not authorize mask mandates. It does not suspend civil liberties. It does not create a vaccine mandate. It does not authorize the development of a vaccine. It does not declare a national public health emergency. There are no FEMA camps hiding behind the shrubbery waiting to abduct your Labrador retriever. Thank you, Dr. Robert Malone. First, I want to say I love it that we all are here to keep each other honest. The truth is when I think about this post, first of all, you have to remember, I still see myself in many ways as Robert Kennedy Jr.'s director of communication. I guess I'll never graduate from that feeling. But to say the words PrEP Act is just a media disaster. I would either have said to him, don't use those words, or if you do, you better post exactly how you're using this. He didn't do that. There was no link to what the actual language was, and I was in Italy. Sure, I didn't take the time to read it. I'm glad Robert Malone made it clear that it was very specific. But let me be clear, it is very specific. We have some of the excerpts from it here. So here are some of the specifics that Robert Malone is pointing out. I recommend, under the conditions stated in this declaration, the manufacture, testing, development, distribution, and voluntary administration and use of the covered countermeasures in individuals possibly exposed to Andes virus on the MV Hondius and in individuals who have had close contact with individuals possibly exposed to Andes virus on the MV Hondius. It goes on to say, covered countermeasures are favipiravir, which is just one drug, and this is what Robert Malone is pointing out. It isn't a bunch of vaccines or any drug you can imagine. It's for one specific drug, and he says, I have determined that liability protections are afforded to covered persons only for recommended activities involving covered countermeasures that are obtained for voluntary administration to individuals in accordance with an approved IND application. So there you have it. For anyone that saw that post, maybe you were upset like I was, maybe you're still upset, or, perhaps you think that the PrEP Act's a bad idea. It is very narrow. Let's be clear about that. I will say that I don't like liability protection, period. I don't know why we ever have to have it. We've been having off-label uses of drugs or drugs that need to come in for emergencies like since the dawn of man, practically. We didn't need liability protection then. I don't know why we need it now. I think using the PrEP Act was just putting this thing in a bad light. It was great to see that he's responding, but also I feel like what I was trying to say is, okay, you're dealing with hantavirus, but where's autism? Hantavirus is affecting about 3 people so far out of 7 billion. Meanwhile, we have an issue affecting 1 in 30 boys and girls, or 1 in 12.5 boys in California, which we've discussed. I think a lot of us want to see some attention there. But all of that said, I want to be clear. Even when I am maybe ribbing Robert Kennedy Jr. a little bit, I still stand by what I've always said about him. I know the man. I know his intentions. I know he hasn't changed. I know he hasn't turned on us. I'm not worried that he isn't doing everything that he can inside of one of the most corrupt political systems that exists in the world. I wouldn't want that job. I'm really happy that he has that job. But I also believe that Donald Trump is making assumptions. And the administration around Donald Trump think that maybe MAHA doesn't care or it doesn't matter. I would guess Bobby was in there saying, do we have to use the PrEP Act? I don't think this is going to look good to our movement. So I want it to be seen that those of us that are speaking out don't like the PrEP Act. We don't want to see it used. I would love to see it abolished. I do not think this is the way we want to go. I also am very concerned about the slippery slope we always see in situations like this. It starts out with one drug. They crack the door open, but then pharma goes in and is better than anything in the world at kicking it wide open and then robbing us of all of our rights. So I don't feel good about it. I still don't feel good about it. I understand that it was narrow, and I'm glad Bobby has obviously gone out of his way to make it as narrow as absolutely possible. But I want you to know I'm still going to state my truth. And if you feel I need to apologize for what I said, I'd love to hear it right now, actually, in your comments. Do you think I overstated it? Did I understate it? Or did I get it just right? I'd love to hear what you have to say. But just know I'm always going to say what I think and what I feel, and that's what I hope you trust in me and the high wire. But I'm glad we have dialed in on what exactly these countermeasures are all about. All right, we've got a huge show coming up. I'm going to go through some amazing interviews that really were mind-changing for me. My brain has been racing as I've traveled over the beautiful hills and the valleys and the islands and the cities of Italy. But first, it's time for the Jackson Report. All right, Jeffrey, we will see if this works. We are trying to pull off a technological miracle because obviously I'm not in the highest Wi-Fi area in the world. I'm in the middle of an olive orchard. We'll see how well this goes. But a lot to report. And of course, you know, the media wants to talk about, you know, how I'm turning on Robert Kennedy Jr. MAHA's falling apart. I hope that's never what anyone believes. I think what we are as a movement, a powerful movement, has to show that we have diversity, we have differing opinions, and sometimes we voice those opinions. That's what the truth is all about, I think.
Yeah, and let's break it down further. MAHA is a label. It's a label. Kennedy is the current figurehead, but he does not represent MAHA. MAHA is currently couched under the Trump administration. There's pros and cons to that. So goes politics. This is the game that we all play as Americans. But the spirit of MAHA cuts through generations. Its history goes back decades. And when we see the media attacking this spirit with flimsy headlines, we're gonna pick them apart, and that's what we're gonna do right here. So we remember just about a month ago, a Boston judge or a Massachusetts judge halted ACIP, halted everything ACIP has done with its reconstituted members. Kennedy fired all 17 members, reconstituted it with a wider swath of experts to really get to the heart of some of the big issues affecting the vaccine policy. Well, here's the headline from Reuters. This is an exclusive, they're calling it. U.S. Health Secretary Kennedy backs away from some recent changes to CDC panel. Oh my gosh, well, if you're just reading headlines, you're thinking, there goes MAHA. Well, you go into this article and it says this: a replacement charter signed by Kennedy on May 14th and reviewed by Reuters no longer contains the requirement for toxicologists, data scientists, and other specific area knowledge. Rather, it says members shall represent, quote, a balanced range of scientific, clinical, and public health expertise. So really quick, remember, he had some time. Kennedy can reconstitute that charter. He can write it any way he wants.
By the way, Jeffrey, you know, let's point out that it was ICANN that advised him to revise that charter. We sent a letter saying to Robert Kennedy Jr., why don't we turn lemons into lemonade? And since they've, you know, sort of broken apart ACIP with an activist judge, why don't you go ahead and broaden ACIP and bring in scientists that are working and doctors that are working with vaccine injury and autism, can talk about the toxic effects of vaccines. So they have a broader coalition when, you know, ACIP has to approve things in the future. So I just want to point out that change in the charter was, I think it was inspired because we actually sent a formal letter on behalf of ICANN stating all those issues.
And we reported that, and that was a success. And so Reuters is saying that's been withdrawn. And apparently, according to Reuters, something new is going to be put out and it's going to have this language. Well, this to me shows that Kennedy is listening to his legal counsel, because that is appealed. The Trump administration appealed the Massachusetts judge cancellation of ASIP. So there's going to be an appeal. A judge will rule on this. So this language change is smart. It's effective. It's going to be a higher percentage that a judge will look at this and say, okay, that seems balanced. So Reuters headline should have said something like, Kennedy strengthens the future court case to allow ASIP to continue its revolutionary changes of the vaccine schedule to catch up to recent science. But he didn't do that. Now let's go on to NBC News. Here's another one. We're just going to go right through these. Here's the headline: no child deaths definitively linked to COVID shots, FDA says. Well, first of all, I want to bring people's attention to the fact that starting in late April to mid-May, just about 2 weeks, the entire top echelon of the FDA has been reshuffled. You have Prasad stepping down, Marty Makary, the FDA director, out, Tracy Beth Hogue fired, walked out. And that headline now, interestingly, the FDA suddenly is having this strong statement with no one to really push back on it. And you go into this NBC News article. It says the FDA's analysis surfaced in a letter Senator Ron Johnson sent this month to Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. regarding transparency around COVID vaccine safety. In the analysis dated December 5th, the FDA reviewed 96 reports of child deaths submitted to the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System through August 14th, 2025. Well, let's not just trust NBC News. Let's go to Senator Ron Johnson's actual letter he sent to Kennedy. Here it is. This is he's the chairman. This is the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. And he says this. If you go down to that date, that's the December 5th, he says, on May 4th, 2026, HHS provided the subcommittee a December 5th, 2025 memorandum detailing 96 pediatric deaths following COVID-19 vaccination, some of which were labeled as possibly or probably related to the vaccine. Johnson goes on to say this. NBC News completely left this out. The analysis described in this memorandum and conducted under your leadership, that's Kennedy, provides even more evidence of the Biden administration's cover-up of the safety risks associated with COVID-19 injections. I suspect there are many more additional records that are responsive to my December 15, 2025 request. So they're still holding back records. This is a major issue. NBC News is reporting on this minor thing and taking kind of a leap of faith in what this actual letter is saying. And if they actually sat down, which they didn't, with Senator Ron Johnson, they may have gotten an interview like this. Take a listen.
Jackie, this is the most egregious government scandal in my lifetime. On March 1st, Peter Marks, the head of the division within FDA that approves vaccines and then surveils the safety, was briefed that the algorithm they're using to analyze VAERS was going to completely mask and hide safety signals. 26 days later, he was shown 25 adverse events where there were, safety signals, including sudden cardiac death, pulmonary infarction, Bell's palsy, different types of strokes, and he hid it. They are lying about it to this day. They continued to use the old algorithm. They knew would hide it, and then they went and lied to the American public. So, again, the hundreds of thousands of people that experienced adverse events, the tens of thousands that died on VAERS, reported on VAERS associated with that vaccine. These people ought to have a cause of action against those government officials that hid what the American people had a right to know. Yeah. But they lied bald-faced to the American public. And unfortunately, I appreciate Fox covering this. Not one major network has picked up the story. This has been 3 weeks now. Like I said, the biggest government scandal in my lifetime. And mum's the word because everybody was complicit in it.
That's a headline. And maybe NBC News had the B team that day, right in the article, but that's the headline right there. The biggest scandal of his lifetime, which is no small potatoes in the times we're living in. So I want to go through one more conversation here of really MAHA topics. One of them is water fluoridation. We reported in 2024 that a judge, San Francisco judge, ruled on that. It was a landmark ruling. Well, a Ninth Circuit has just overturned that ruling. Ninth Circuit revokes commandeering judge's fluoride ruling. Well, again, going to have to correct that headline. So what they basically said, it was basically about a 6 to 8 page decision, and they were arguing on the standing of the ruling, not the merits. The court case went on for 4 years. It started in the summer of 2020, and a massive amount of evidence was produced. This Ninth Circuit basically said that because it started in the summer of 2020, it should have been ruled, the case should have been ruled on the evidence of all of the data up to 2020. Well, that's a problem because during that 4 years of this court case, major things happened. And the Ninth Circuit is saying this judge, Judge Chen, should eliminate everything he learned, everything the public learned after 2020 to make health decisions for the entire American population. Well, what's ignored? Well, the National Toxicology Program did the largest review of the data ever on fluoride, which was put in this case, which both sides, by the way, said were highly relevant during this court case. And it says this is August 2024, the state of the science concerning fluoride exposure, kind of a big deal if you're litigating fluoride exposure. And it says this, 18 of the 19 low risk of bias studies, so those are great studies, reported inverse associations between estimated fluoride exposure and IQ scores in children. 17 of these were statistically significant inverse associations. So here we go. And then JAMA, we have the Journal of the American Medical Association, kind of another big journal. Fluoride exposure in children's IQ scores, a systematic review and meta-analysis. Again, they looked at all the data separately from the national government's research. It says this systematic review and meta-analysis found, again, here we go, inverse associations and dose-response association between fluoride measurements in urine and drinking water and children's IQ across large multi-country epidemiological literature. So again, the more fluoride, the lower children's IQ. That's what the court found. That's what the science finds. The Ninth Circuit says, hey, don't worry about all that. We don't care about all that because that came in after 2020. In a way, this is kind of like what Bayer and other foreign chemical companies are trying to do with the pesticide conversation. They're trying to say no new information should be allowed to be brought into courts. Actually, the label says it's safe. And the EPA can review it maybe in about 10 years. But until then, we go with the EPA says no new science is allowed. This is what the courts are doing. So you can see on the merits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I want to say is, this is a technicality. And to imagine this is not someone on trial for murder where they should just be given, every benefit of doubt that's available to them. This is an industry that, as we know, is poisoning children. And so for these justices to say, essentially, we're going to rule, we're going to set back a development that has taken years and years in court on a technicality where it is clear the science is showing the IQ is dropping in our babies, but we don't care about that. We want to make sure that the industry gets to keep poisoning these children until you can mount another case that will get delayed for 5 to 10 more years. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I don't really get, exactly the nuance of how courts work, but this just seems so egregious. And you know what it really reminds me of? It reminds me of Andy Wakefield, and it's something that I've said for years. People say he's a fraud, he committed fraud. Never, ever was it proved that Andy Wakefield committed fraud. The only thing they said was they got him on a technicality. He didn't get the proper ethical approval from his hospital to do the studies that were being done. No one ever said those studies were wrong, not on a scientific level. No one's ever proved that they were a fraud. What they said essentially was, you didn't get approval, therefore we're going to erase what you've discovered here. And now we're talking over 20 years it's been of children, I believe, being diagnosed with autism after being injured by a vaccine because the courts do this. They get in the way. And by the way, without ICANN, Jeffrey, without nonprofits that will fund, lawsuits like this, which have never really happened until groups like ours, Informed Consent Action Network, certainly Children's Health Defense does some of this work. But these organizations, we work so hard and spend a fortune to get these cases in there and push them over the top. And they know, let's just delay it. Let's just throw it back and make it start all over again. It's not right. It's not fair for our children. And this is part of the problem with a system like we have in America. The corporations are just so much better, have more, they have all the money in the world to take advantage of these, is it a loophole? I don't know. You also have these activist judges that hate anything that happens during the Trump administration years. But whatever, I know ultimately we're going to win this fluoride battle. I hope this then, it's time to appeal this, obviously, I guess, and go to the Supreme Court and see if they too don't care what's happening to the IQs of our future generations in the United States of America.
And this is why actual journalism is so important, because These flimsy, misrepresented headlines create talking points. That creates public momentum. That public momentum then goes into political action and legal actions. And here we go. So we have to break these down. But in the court of public opinion, MAHA and the spirit of MAHA is winning. It's common sense. It's these political actions and the judges' actions and these Ninth Circuits and things like this that are overturning this on what appear to be, again, really, really flimsy grounds, not really thought out analysis. So let's talk about the political piece on this. We have former Congressman Tim Ryan, and he wrote an op-ed 2 years ago. It's kind of evergreen now, and it came to fruition. He says this in Newsweek: "Hey, Democrats, we should work with RFK Jr. on fixing America's food system." Well, he's right on that, and chemicals and vaccines. But regardless of that, here's Tim Ryan recently on an interview. Listen to what he had to say.
Bobby Kennedy delivered the election for Donald Trump. I mean, he still didn't win by that much in those swing states. When you take those MAHA independent voters, in many ways single issue voters who wanted to really prioritize this up the political food chain, and the numbers in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan and Georgia and North Carolina, all these states that were on a razor's edge, when Bobby Kennedy was polling at one point at 15% as an independent, clearly had more than any other chip on the board. Trump was smart enough to recognize that politics is about addition, not subtraction, brought Kennedy over, and I thought that swung the election for him.
How dumb are the Democrats that they didn't run Bobby Kennedy? I mean, what idiots?
Yeah, I mean,
really.
It was so complicated. It was so polarized. It was so hot button at that point. But to dismiss, to narrow your electoral opportunities like that in such a significant way, I think really came back to bite them on the rear end. I don't think anybody at the higher levels of the Democratic Party was thinking it would make that big of a difference. I mean, those of us out here in the real world thought a little bit differently about it, but it ended up biting them in the rear end.
Sure did.
Yeah, and what he's saying there, really, again, the spirit that represents MAHA. People don't deserve to be treated like this. They don't need to be treated like this. And any political container that tries to envelop MAHA and not really, it's an idea whose time has come, and not listen to the will of the people, they will blast out of that container and find a new container that represents them better. So this is a warning. Congressman Tim Ryan saw it. Trump capitalized on it, but the future is bright for this kind of ideology in America. And something else is also happening. Medicine itself is changing. The idea of medicine itself is changing. It's a little more slow motion, and it's a little more behind the scenes and on the benches of laboratories and researchers and scientists, but it is happening. The idea, I'm going to look at Patrick Soon-Schwang. He's an inventor, a surgeon, a scientist, a researcher, a cancer researcher, and he was on Tucker Carlson talking about cancer in a whole different way that the public may have never heard of before. Take a listen.
What kills cancer? The natural killer cells and T cells. So in that CBC, there's a thing called the lymphocytes, correct? Do you look at that? No. The only cell that is important that kills cancer, 99.9% of oncologists will say, we don't pay any attention to that.
So often you watch it come roaring back. I'm in remission, and then wham, you just get hit by a tidal wave of cancer and eliminated.
So if you see my writings, I have written so many times, you win the battle and you lose the war.
So this is not, I'm not imagining this phenomenon.
You're not imagining it. You win the battle and you lose the war. The reason you win the battle is because you see this little blip of a response with chemotherapy. And then the moment you stop, or not even, you've actually now killed the cells that were there to protect you. You've upregulated the suppressor cells, and you get metastasis, and you say, oops, sorry, you now have to go to hospice. Think about that. That's what we've been doing for 50 years. That's the dogma that I'm fighting.
So he's not the first one to ever talk about this, but he is making a massive impact by simply stating it from a place of understanding. And what he said there, chemotherapy, it kills the actual cells, T cells, natural killer cells that are your body's defense to fight cancer. So it's doing the opposite. It's the antithesis of trying to defeat cancer or rebalance the immune system. So the idea of starting to work with the immune system, understand it in a more natural, holistic way is moving through medicine, and it's about time. So I want to take that idea, I want to go into some of the developments, some studies that are coming forward now that seem to be exciting. And to paint this idea, first of all, there's an entire class of antibiotic resistant bugs. These are called superbugs. And two of the big ones here, this is one, look at the headlines. Among superbugs, MRSA, this is staph infections. This drug-resistant staph infections is at the forefront of antimicrobial resistance. That's a huge run. And then we have antimicrobial tuberculosis, TB, and that counts for about 1 in 3 deaths from antimicrobial resistance. So the antibiotics are simply not working on these drugs. Medicine is out of ammo. They have no way to fight these things, and it's killing a lot of people around the world. Well, some studies from Ireland have just come out, and this is the Daily Mail reporting on this. Turbocharging immune system could mean end of antibiotics. So it says lead researcher Devla Murphy, an immunologist at Trinity College Dublin, told Good Health, quote, when we had trained the cells, they were better able to kill tuberculosis and staph aureus bacteria, staph infection. Intriguingly, the Daily Mail writes, people vaccinated against TB were less likely to die not just from TB, but from other infections too. The Trinity team wanted to know whether they could replicate that protective effect without a vaccine. Here we go, paradigm shift time. So we want the immune system to activate in a more natural way with more natural components than putting an injection into somebody. So remember, Patrick Soon-Schwong in that clip we just saw, he said the current accepted cancer paradigm, it kills natural killer cells, it kills T cells. Well, there is something called interferons. It's a group of signaling proteins that activate those killer cells and those T cells. So this is what these researchers did in Ireland. This is the actual study here. So we're going to go into a little bit of the science, but I'll explain this. It says interferon gamma. That is, again, that's these signaling proteins, that the alarm system for the immune system. Interferon gamma induce trained immunity, enhances killing of priority pathogens. That's the tuberculosis. That's the staph infections in healthy and genetically vulnerable individuals. So they write this, the researchers. In conclusion, we provide evidence to support the hypothesis that exposing human monocytes to interferon gamma induces trained immunity in macrophages. So just breaking this down, they trained the interferon gamma before they introduced it into the cells. So it's almost like taking soldiers and putting them through boot camp and then putting them on the battlefield, as opposed to just putting people on the battlefield that's never seen battle before. So when the immune system gets these trained kind of instructions, they know exactly what to do. So it says that it trained immunity in macrophages, that's the cleanup crew, by enhancing host responses to infection of tuberculosis and staph infection. Moreover, a single exposure of interferon gamma to monocytes from genetically vulnerable people was sufficient to support macrophage immunity to these pathogens of concern. These data have important implications for the design of immunosupportive, host-directive, adjunctive therapy, or preemptive prophylactic interventions in vulnerable or immunosuppressed hosts. So again, paradigm shift here. They're saying this could be used for populations that are in the target of these or for immunosuppressed people. So right now, they're saying there's safe natural therapies designed specifically for those who have immunosuppression to this. Right now, what we're doing is blanketing entire populations with risky vaccines because of those few immunosuppressed people. Risky vaccines that harm people because we're trying to protect a few immunosuppressed people. We're keeping kids out of school because of 1 immunosuppressed or 2 immunosuppressed children. This research flips that entire paradigm on its face. It's a massive change. Now, it's not off the shelf. You can't buy these products yet, but this shows an idea of where researchers are going.
It does. I think what we're seeing here is that, the word is out. People are starting to really question vaccines. And as the industry seems to want to make everything a vaccine, when you have 60% of pregnant moms now in America saying, I'm going to skip vaccines. I'm going to go against the CDC schedule. Certainly smart scientists should start looking other direction. Pretty good sign, by the way, where the study basically says, look, we know that a vaccine induces this, type of protection, but could we get the immune system to respond without a vaccine? And then they go out and do it. Doesn't even seem like that study would have seen the light of day or been funded in any way 10 years ago. I really do think we are now in a beautiful new world, or at least, the beginnings of one.
Yeah, the beginnings for sure. Let's finish off with cancer. Just last month, we reported some researchers out of Japan been working on this for years. They found that the gut microbiota in amphibians, they actually found one of the gut microbiota, it's Ewingella americana. It's a new therapeutic agent that has cytotoxic and immunomodulatory properties, which means basically it can kill cancer and it can up-level the immune system against cancerous tumors. And it was very effective at that. Well, moving on that research, looking to the natural environment for cancer, I'll say the word cures, but something that can help the human race with cancer, we have this headline out of UCLA. Research expands on using bee venom to treat cancer. And this really started in a big way in 2020 with this research. This is a very extensive research here. Honeybee venom and melatonin suppresses growth factor receptor activation of HER-enriched and triple-negative breast cancer. Melatonin is the actual protein of the bee venom, the actual component. And the researchers say this. Here we demonstrate that honeybee venom and its major component, melatonin, potentially induce cell death, particularly in the aggressive triple-negative and HER-enriched breast cancer subtypes. Again, no answer to these. They're looking at bee venom. That might be an answer. Honey bee venom and melatonin suppress the activation of EGFR and HER by interfering with the phosphorylation of these receptors in the plasma membrane of breast cancer carcinoma cells. So we look at one of the images here from this actual study, and these are if you look at this, the blue line and the red line, it's titled SKBR3 and SUM 159. These are human breast cancer cell lines. And you can see at the top here, honeybee venom treated them and melatonin treated them. And you look at the bottom, that's the timeline. Not 60 months, not 60 days or 60 weeks, 60 minutes. In 60 minutes after treatment, you see a massive degradation of cell viability in these human breast cancer cells. Again, tabletop exercises, you can't buy this stuff off the shelf. Your doctor's not going to prescribe these, but this is massive. No current treatment shows any of this right now that's being given, not chemotherapy, nothing. So again, and these researchers go on to say this in the article, in their research, they conclude with this. Honeybee venom is available globally and offers cost-effective and easily accessible treatment options. So they're acknowledging how much it costs for the current chemotherapy. So it's accessible treatment options in remote or less developed regions. Further research will be required to assess whether the venom of some genotypes of bees has more specific or potent anti-cancer activities, which could be exploited. So, my God, I mean, talking about thinking outside the box. And now at this point, 2026, there's already meta-analysis, systemic reviews of all the data, because there's so much data piling in here. Here's one of them, a potential game changer, melatonin, that's that protein from the bee venom, potential game changer in the fight against breast cancer. This is really, really good news, and it's showing that research in medicine is thinking outside the box in a big way and understanding that after 50 years of a non-holistic approach, they're going back to a centered, balanced approach to treat the entire body as it stands with the immune system. We'll report on this more, but this is great momentum.
It's really exciting. And just to see, I always love it when we go back to nature and start finding that maybe nature has it right. Maybe there's answers there. Of course, when we do any of these stories, I just think, where would we be if pharma didn't just have a death grip on our government, on our regulatory agencies, a death grip on our television, on our news, a death grip on our judicial systems and the minds of our judges and lawyers around the world. Can you imagine if we could really start moving in the direction of seeing NIH, funding bee venom studies and even, light beds and red light therapy and all the things that are out there. We could be living in that beautiful new world. It feels like that's, when you're in a beautiful place like this, it certainly is what I've been contemplating. What could the world be if we could just get out of this stranglehold of corporate interests and back to creativity and entrepreneurialism, which is really the heart of America. Anyway, Jeffrey, awesome reporting as always. It looks like it held up. Hopefully, we've made it through the gauntlet. This is going to be the hardest part for you and I to communicate from, around the world. But continue to do the great work. Love the investigations, and I'll see you next week.
All right. Good luck out there, Del. Thanks.
All right, great. Well, look, if you're watching right now on the High Wire, all of this is made possible by you. I say it at the top of every show. There are no sponsors. We are actually able to talk about great new interventions because pharma is not telling us what we can and can't report. It's why we were the first ones to ever talk about the dangers of vaccines. I mean, they could take our YouTube channel away, our Facebook channel, but we knew you were smart enough to type in our website and find us anyway, which is how we made it through COVID and went from hundreds of thousands of viewers to millions overnight. But the truth is right now we are living in at the very least, a censorship-free zone with Robert Kennedy Jr. doing all that he can do inside of government, and he's surrounded by vipers. I know he is. I know it's not easy, but we do have this moment to try and change our world as much as we possibly can before we get an administration in that believes in lockdowns, believes in the WEF and the WHO, and wants globalist control and doesn't believe America should have sovereignty. How many protections are we going to put in place over these next couple of years really is going to be decided by you, because I think we've got the best attorney in the world in Aaron Siri and his team of nearly 80 professionals that are working to fight for medical freedom, medical choice. Every single day we have over 90 cases. We also have a legal update this week. We did just submit a letter. ICANN urges toxicology review of vaccine ingredients like aluminum and formaldehyde. ICANN has nominated 4 vaccine ingredients, aluminum, mercury, formaldehyde, and phenol, for review by a federal toxicology agency. Again, putting pressure on the administration so that hopefully Robert Kennedy Jr. can say, hey, yeah, let's do these studies. Thanks for the help, ICANN. Thank you for the pressure. Thanks for the idea. This is what we're doing here. You make that possible, but think about all that's being done. Think about all the lawsuits. Think about where we would be if Highwire hadn't been here in the last 10 years. And then I want you to think about who you're thanking. You're thanking everyone that did fund this work, did fund Aaron Siri, and did, win back the religious exemption from vaccines in Mississippi, and did win in West Virginia. Even though that's being appealed, we've got the wind at our backs. The momentum is moving our direction. Can you imagine where we could be with 2 more years of pressure in courtrooms? It's now or never. I mean, we've got to establish, foundational principles, in cement, enshrine them inside of our constitutional rights again before someone else tries to take them away. We also have a matching donation going on right now. We've had $250,000 raised so far against the $1.5 million match. We have till June, the end of June, I believe it's 30th, to match that. So $1.25 million is still left to this match, and you can make it possible. I know you're sitting there at home thinking, my $10 isn't going to make a difference, or my $100. And this is what I keep trying to say as I travel America, as I travel Italy. I'm going to be in Europe, in France, in Poland in just over a week. I keep saying, if you don't think that next step matters, then we are never going to change the world. Because when millions of people just take one step together, it is transformational. So that step for you to say, you know what, I will try giving $5 or I will give $10, you're not alone. And when you do that, I think we work to change the consciousness of the world, to become more active participants in this work that is critical. We are going to be alive when they write the pages of this history book. Did we lose our freedom? Did we give up bodily sovereignty during our generation on our time? Or did we stand up, against Goliath once again and win for our children and future generations? You are making that possible. That is my message to the Italian people. It's going to be my message in about a week in Poland, in France. And I got done with a Zoom call the other day with Japan because I'm traveling to Japan. They just had a press conference last week where there was about 50 top press people in Japan that watched an Inconvenient Study. Apparently they were blown away. They're very excited for me to get there. Do you see what you're doing just by allowing us to do this work? We are spreading a message that is now starting to travel and spread around the world. You are making that possible, and it's just as easy as going to the top of the page, hit donate, and then just scroll with the screen, follow it to become a recurring donor if that makes sense for you. It certainly makes it easier if we know how much we can count on every month. We're looking for $26 for 2026 would be awesome. But honestly, your $1, your $5, ditch the cappuccino once a month and put that money towards saving our children. We can also make it easy. If you're listening right now, you can just text me at 72022. Type in the word donate, and I will respond with a text to you so that you can become a member an active member of the Informed Consent Action Network. We are a network together that truly is changing the world. And I hear that everywhere I go, even here in Italy, people are coming up, they're crying, they're saying, thank you, you helped me get through COVID. Who knew? I wasn't even speaking in Italian, and yet that message was getting throughout COVID. So thank you for everyone that sponsors the work that we do. We would not be here without you, and I hope you feel all of the success every time we're able to announce another victory, another change, another rip in the control oligarchs' desire to take control of our world. That's what we're up against. All right. Speaking of the world, just this incredible opportunity this week to visit Italy. And I have to say, it's been some time since we really spoke of Italy because they were the center point of COVID. Remember, we saw a few people falling down in these very strange videos out of China. I think most of us thought this is a scam. I'm not even sure if I believe it. No one was going to do anything. Even Tony Fauci was saying, don't worry about this never hitting America. But then all of a sudden, Italy happened. All of a sudden, up in Bergamo, in northern Italy, it just looked like semis were being filled with dead bodies. It was total pandemonium. And certainly in that, they were able to ignite a terror that rocked the hearts and minds of every citizen of the world. And shockingly, the world responded. Every government seemed to work in lockstep. That is why I think Italy is so important still in this investigation. I'm going to share with you some of the videos. But first, this is what we remember from Italy and COVID.
The coronavirus.
Italy is on total lockdown.
Despite Europe's tightest lockdown, authorities say the death toll is still spiking.
Italy is currently experiencing the peak of the coronavirus outbreak, the highest death toll anywhere in the world.
Emergency rooms are at, or some doctors say past, the breaking point.
Italy has a significant number of elderly. It's the second oldest population in the world.
After a jump in deaths over the weekend from coronavirus, with health officials warning that the Lombardy region was starting to run out of hospital beds.
They've run out of room at the morgue. Their families couldn't even say goodbye. They're all in quarantine.
Army trucks taking away the bodies of COVID-19 victims. And new infections and deaths reported every day.
There will be more controls on the street as well as roadblocks to ensure that people are not moving about without any valid reason. The president of the region asked for military on the streets.
Nobody knows what the outcome of this is going to be.
Italy is kind of the new ground zero now. Looking at it right now, Italy has almost 12,500 cases.
We have to look at Italy. Look at the headlines in Italy and what they show us about the health of people and the largest percentage that are dying of COVID-19. 99% of those who died from virus had other illness. It's gone a step further. Why have so many coronavirus patients died in Italy? The country's high death toll is due to an aging population, overstretched health system, and the way fatalities are reported. Only 12% of death certificates have shown a direct causality from coronavirus, while 88% of patients who have died have at least one premorbidity. Many had 2 or 3. This is excess deaths. This is deaths that either goes above the average line or below it. We are below the top line, okay? This is what has the entire world terrorized.
Well, it was really amazing. We landed in Milan and immediately raced to our first screening of an Inconvenient Study. And there at the theater, we were able to meet with some of the local scientists, doctors, and journalists that found themselves in that epicenter dealing with the COVID outbreak. And it was a very enlightening experience, I have to say, for me and my camera crew. We were all mind blown at what we're hearing, what we're seeing. The first interview I want to bring your attention to is the first interview I ended up doing with Alberto Contri. He's a former president of Pubblicità Progresso and former RAI board member, RAI being one of the biggest media companies in Italy. This was a media man. He said his expertise was actually media, advertising, and pharmaceutical. So he was well aware of science and where media collide, had tons of friends and political people that he knew when all this was going on, and he really had a perspective that actually blew my mind. My guest is Professor Alberto Contri. He's a professor of communications, has held high-level institutional roles such as former president of Pubblicità Progresso, an Italian nonprofit organization that promotes social advertising. He was on the board of RAI Television, which is the largest public broadcasting news agency in Italy, and got deeply involved in discussions about propaganda throughout COVID. Alberto, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
The vaccine took 1 year, really, in the pandemic. Here, we were under the impression that many, many people were dying in Italy, that it was higher death rates than we had ever seen. Were there higher death rates since you knew doctors and you knew experts, did they think they were seeing a real pandemic, or what is it just being heightened by media exaggeration?
You spoke about fear. Per esempio, c'è stato un evento clamoroso.
Italy launched this massive fear campaign. We all especially remember on TV there was this small city of Bergamo, where we saw these big military trucks, which told us they were carrying lots of coffins, each of them, whilst in reality, it was one coffin per truck.
You can imagine looking in TV, 30 truck.
This was the biggest fear propaganda they did.
Il secondo elemento molto grave che stanno
And the second element is that all elderly people who were entering a hospital, and they were maybe affected by other pathologies which were not COVID, were immediately declared COVID. So why? Because the government was giving money, a refund to the hospital, which was 5 times higher for COVID patients than normal patients. That's why even if they had 3, 4 pathologies, they wrote that down.
It's a corruption.
The same thing happened in America. This is the first time I've heard that it happened in other countries. We were paying 5 times for COVID over flu. Flu, maybe $100, COVID, $900. Also putting people on ventilators, more money. Putting people on remdesivir, more money. Yes. And then when they died, more money. So our question was, were we manufacturing death through our hospital systems? How do you explain doctors going along with that decision? Was it just money? Were doctors getting paid to up the bill, or were they forced?
Both.
Yeah.
I medici in parte.
Partly it was due for money, because basically every doctor was receiving 80 euros from the government per injection. So every doctor, who generally makes 3,000 to 4,000 per month, was making 20,000. So a big difference. Other doctors were convinced. Because we have these so-called viral stars, these virologists on TV, who were paid by pharmaceutical companies to make a massive propaganda, so much so that the population split in two. Well, let's say not exactly two, because 80% of the population was totally in favor and believed in science, and 20% was against, but had no possibility of speaking, because they were crushed down and marginalized and suspended for refusing. Now there are a lot of legal actions ongoing by doctors who were suspended. During a talk show, I asked a question to Dr. Bassetti, who was from the University of Genoa, who was the biggest promoter of vaccines in Italy at that time. And I asked him, is it true that you have 14 ongoing contracts with pharmaceutical companies? And Bassetti just removed his earphones and left.
No, Mattei, no, Mattei. No, vabbè.
Wow. So I became very famous because of that.
You know, I know if you've been watching the Highwire, certainly if you watched throughout COVID, you're thinking, yeah, all right, we've already heard that story. But we were hearing it in America really months after it struck Italy. And this is what really hit me as I was listening to him. This happened the moment this outbreak starts, if it's an outbreak, whatever we want to call it. The moment this pandemic starts, it starts in Italy. China kind of like, oh, there's something happening there. But Italy is where this explodes. And how could it possibly be that the officials in Italy just on their own decided, you know what we should do right now? We should make this look worse than it looks by incentivizing it to be diagnosed as COVID. It goes against logic, actually. No country wants to look like they're having an outbreak or are unable to control it. So why would you incentivize it to look like it's even bigger than it is? Why would you line up vehicles and say they're filled with dead bodies? You're going to destroy your own tourism. You're going to destroy, the idea that there's good medicine in Italy. Your own people are going to want to leave because you look completely inept. It goes against all that is logical, which said to me as I was sitting here listening to the identical stories we heard, incentivizing, paying more for COVID, and then what were we hearing? There is no flu. There is no RSV this year, something that defies all reason also. And then you had, of course, staging of deaths and bodies. And then remember, it made me think about New York City. Remember the giant first, a Red Cross ship that pulled up so we would have all the extra rooms in the Javits Center, if you've ever seen it. Thousands of beds that were never used. We were being told this thing was out of control, but all we really saw were dances by nurses and doctors who apparently had plenty of time to learn to dance and, choreograph dance numbers. But it happened in Italy first, and it acted exactly like we did, which just made me think something that I have pushed back on. Many of you said, Del, clearly this was all planned out. I said, well, I don't know. I think it's opportunism. I think this virus came along and a bunch of different entities jumped on. I am now changing my perspective. It is clear this thing was scripted before it ever even hit Italy, because it makes no sense Italy would act the way it did. And then that really makes you think, why did they know they were going to need to inflate the numbers? As we talk about gain of function and everything, they obviously didn't believe they had a virus that was going to be strong at all. They knew they were going to have to inflate numbers to pull this all together. Wrap your head around that, because my brain has been spinning for the last week thinking about it. But just to back up this position, of course, that's someone in media in Alberto Contri. Did doctors have the same feeling about it? My next interview is Dr. Mariano Amici, fantastic doctor that was treating COVID, is really seen as a hero inside of the medical freedom movement here in Italy. This is what he had to say about it.
I was the coordinator of a group of doctors, and we studied over 10,000 patients. They cured over 10,000 people, and they not even once had a single death. And they were all treated successfully, not only COVID patients, but also patients of other concerns.
Italy was seen to be the explosion of death. It scared the world. High rates of death from COVID. Was that exaggerated?
That explosion was caused by the fact that they had to make up the fact of there being so many deaths, but this was totally made up.
How did they make it up? How did they do that?
On national TV, they started to send images and pictures and videos of many people, but these were not from COVID. These were immigrants that came in the south of Italy, and they were probably naturally dead. They were screening on TVs, all these images of those people, but they were not from COVID. And especially they made up the numbers of infected people according to the nose swab that they did. Those tests were totally incorrect, so they instead used those to spike up the numbers. Another very big cause of these high numbers of dead people is that they treated patients with incorrect medications and incorrect treatments. Sometimes when people died by car accidents, they were sent to the emergency room. They performed the nose swab test. And if that came out positive for COVID, they would say that that patient died from COVID instead of a car accident.
Have you ever seen anything like this in medicine?
I've been a doctor for over 46 years, and this has never happened. I was truly almost traumatized by this whole situation.
Do you believe most doctors know the truth?
Nowadays, many doctors are starting to open their eyes and understand the truth. Unfortunately, many of my peers had to bow down to some higher establishment in order not to lose their job.
Are you worried about losing your job?
I'd prefer to be fired rather than continue operating in the way that protocols were telling me to do. I continue to cure, but not under the department and protocols.
Same blood of heroes I was speaking to here, like the Peter McCulloughs and the Paul Merricks, the same story. Talking about car accidents, and then the hospital would make you go and do a blood test. The person was already dead, see if they had COVID, and then let's make it COVID so we get paid more, and so that we change the numbers and the death rates. Again, they needed to inflate it. Why? They needed a panic. Why? But here's what's so curious. How did they know they were going to have to do this? Because it was like day one. And then you had all these doctors. I'm going to show you several of them. They knew how to treat this from the very beginning. In their own practice, he said, I had 10,000 patients. We just used steroids and antibiotics before it would turn into pneumonia. And we knew to reduce inflammation. It was obvious what had to happen here. He said, I had 10,000 patients and none of them went to the hospital. But then they brought in the protocol. One doctor called it the death protocol. We were having so much success. And then remember the moment in America, Paul Merrick said, I had all these tools. I was the #1 ICU doctor. I was saving more lives than anybody. And then they just took my tools away and made me watch people die.
I was not allowed to treat these people. I had to stand by idly. I had to stand by idly watching these people die.
This is a neurologist. Coming up next, Dr. Rosanna Negri. She's a hero. People talk about her in all the audiences as I was traveling Italy for the work that she did, establishing protocols that work, standing up against the system, and calling out many of the injuries she was seeing. This was her perspective on what happened there.
My name is Rosanna Negri. I am a neurologist and holistic doctor. And I spent a lot of time in the last 5 years to write the right protocol to heal patients with COVID and also to detoxificate patients with side effect from named vaccine that is not vaccine but is experimental genetic drug.
When COVID first came to Italy, were doctors just treating it normally, or you talked about a protocol. How
Very, very quickly, because we have news from colleagues from China, and also we have an extraordinary doctor that was a martyr now, Dr. De Dono, that bring to the attention a very simple idea that was to cure with antibodies of healed people. It's very simple. We know it from 100 years old, and it works. In 3 days, patients will recover completely. And above all, we have also a lesson from the past, from COVID-1, 10 years before. So we know perfectly of the cure. Moreover, I added personally the ivermectin that 3 times, 5 days, 4 days instead, 10 days.
You were having success, and did you recommend that to the health bodies? Were there doctors saying to the Minister of Health, this is working?
Yes, we tried, of course. We have the success. We treated
70,000 patients were healed.
Patients with only 10 that get
Only 10 people get hospitalized.
Out of 70,000.
Exactly. And we bring all these documents with the medical records in the Parliament in Senatus in Italy. And what happened? The day after we made this communication, all the press wrote against us that we gave a fake therapy, that we are witchers or something like that.
Witches? They called you witches.
Yes, witches.
Wow.
But some of them were suspended from their professional, they suspended their license. And this is a violation of the freedom of the doctor, because we cure in science and in conscience and with conscience. Which were the Hippocratic principles.
It was amazing to hear this incredible Italian doctor talking about the Hippocratic principles, that those that stuck to their guns and treated patients were having success, were called witches by the media. Many of them had their licenses removed. Think about how orchestrated this thing was. I know we all want to put COVID in our rearview mirror, but we cannot let them ever get away with this. For me, it was just such a wake-up call. This wasn't just America. It was every country walking in lockstep to a script. Every doctor I talked to knew, like, they're all the top in Italy. They're the best of the best. And frankly, some of these scientists and doctors I met, I would say, are the best in the world that I've ever met. They're calling their friends that are the head of the health committee, and they're getting the phone hung up on them, not listening. How did the health committee know they shouldn't be taking these doctors seriously for the first time in their careers? What other outbreak would they ever ignore the best of the best that were telling them we can treat this? This idea of sending them home is stupid. Giving them paracetamol or aspirin is just removing their glutathione. The health ministers are being told this, and somehow in every single country, all of them knew to hang up the phone, not listen, pay more for it to be called COVID, and fire anybody that's talking like this. That's a script, folks. That's a script with an agenda that is designed, as I have said, to wage war on every citizen in the world. I'm not the only journalist that sees it this way. One of the rebel journalists in Italy had a lot to say about the fact that they were sending people home to die. This is Raffaella Regoli. So to begin with, what was your position? What were you as a journalist prior to the COVID pandemic?
Io sono da sempre una giornalista d'inchiesta.
Basically, I am an investigative journalist. So, before I used to deal with other types of investigations, like child abuse, and obviously when COVID started, I immediately sensed that there was something wrong, and I wanted to see, so I went against my company and went into a hospital on the 17th of March. And basically what I saw was hell, because the director of the hospital was crying. and they say they come here with their lungs already highly compromised because the government had this policy: stay home, wait, and just take paracetamol. Basically, just certain doctors were trying to treat their patients with antibiotics against the Ministry of Health guidance.
But how do you explain, obviously cortisone, steroids, anti-inflammatories, even ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. In America, we weren't allowed to use them, but Italy was first. Why were doctors told to not use standard protocol? Standard medicine is the earlier the treatment, the earlier the diagnosis, the better. All of a sudden, for the first time ever, doctors being told, do not treat, keep them at home. How do you explain that?
Hai colto nel segno.
Such a good point, because the WHO needed to have thousands of deaths in order to be able to declare the pandemic, and needed to have no cure. Italy was chosen way back in 2014 as a front runner for this mandatory vaccination program. When the vaccine arrived in January 2021, I interviewed many professors, and then off camera I asked them, are you going to do it on your kids or do it on your family members? And they said no. And I asked them why, because the vaccine is still in phase 1 and there was no safety. And then we started seeing all the deaths linked to this vaccine. And Minister Speranza, the health minister at the time, was constantly saying we should not stop the vaccine enthusiasm.
You've now written a book about WHO. After going through this pandemic, I was a journalist too. I've tried to make sense of everything that happened. Doctors not giving the right treatment, a vaccine that wasn't tested. Even after injury, they keep using the vaccine. Do you believe there's a larger agenda? And what is that agenda? What are we really up against?
Yes, I think so. I think that the pandemic just opened the Pandora, but just a bit. It has just been opened. There's so much more behind it. I think the strategy of the OMS is just something in the hands of someone even higher, of a higher elite. The power on top of the big pharma as well, like JP Morgan and BlackRock, just to mention a couple. And so they move the policies of the states, and the WHO is like an instrument. It's the Ministry of Truth, which emanates diktats in mandatory things for governments who then have to impose them. They declare emergency, they create fear, and people will have to comply.
Do you believe we will see another pandemic, another attempt to take away our rights, the Green Pass and things?
Yes, for sure, there will be. The USA did well to get out of the WHO. Tedros Ghebreyesus, director of the WHO, said the next pandemic will come. We don't have to ask ourselves if, but when. And we know that there are biolabs all over the world which are studying and testing biological weapons, functions, advancements, Ebola, HIV, COVID. They all came out from somewhere, and it wasn't a bat.
Well, I think, she's obviously journalists see this the same way. I think what I keep saying, and I'm sure she would second the perspective, is take their word for it. If Tedros is saying it's not a matter of if, it's when the next pandemic comes. And you see all the funding WHO gets from Bill Gates, who keeps telling you he wants to reduce the population. Take these people for their word. One of the things, though, I really questioned was, obviously there were inflating numbers, but was there anything at all happening up in Bergamo where this whole thing blew up? Were there, would there be any way to tell if we saw death rates, and did it continue throughout Italy? I guess my question was there a real virus that was doing this? And just like in America and other places around the world, it wasn't just doctors and scientists. There were data analysts and people that were geniuses at building programs and charting numbers and collecting data. I met just one of those individuals. His name is Giovanni Trambusti, a brilliant man who's published on the topic of the death numbers in Italy. Listen to this. My next guest is Giovanni Trambusti. He's an electrical engineer. Just your background, what is your expertise?
My expertise is in data processing and statistical analysis. So when the COVID situation started, I immediately saw that something wasn't adding up. So I decided to download the raw data from ISTAT, that is the Italian Institute for Statistics.
ISTAT?
ISTAT, yes.
Okay.
The Italian official state, Italian National Institute for Statistics. So I was month after month downloading the raw data of mortality in Italy to see if there was a real correspondence between what was announced on TV, newspapers, etc., government, and the real numbers.
I feel on this investigation being here in Italy, what I had forgotten really because it's been so long is Italy lit the fuse of the panic for the world.
Yeah.
China, we saw people falling down, but it seemed like it was China's problem.
Yeah.
But then when it hit Italy, it was suddenly made the world's problem.
Yeah.
And it looked like everyone in Italy was dying in our press.
Yeah.
Like they were being wiped out. COVID was the most dangerous virus we'd ever seen, the worst pandemic in our lifetimes. When you look at those numbers, is that represented in the deaths of COVID? Was this virus as deadly as we were being told?
We had a huge concentration of deaths in the northern area, especially Bergamo, Brescia, and other towns, and almost nothing in the other parts of Italy. So it was very concentrated there, and we still don't understand really what could happen there, because when the government said that they were going to lock down everyone, many immigrants, Italian immigrants from the south that were living to the north, decided to rush down to the south to avoid the lockdown.
Okay.
So a huge amount of people went from north to south, trains, cars, airplanes, and so on. And for some magical reasons, the contagion, the virus, didn't migrate south. So we had not an explosion of the COVID illness in the south. So it's really something that has to be investigated, but it's not my field. I'm not an epidemiologist.
All you know is the numbers aren't adding up. Some real revelations there by Trambusti. First of all, one of the things I was questioning, did anything happen in the north at all? Was it completely manufactured? And he said, I mean, as you listen to him, if you look at the mortality numbers, there is this explosion. Something happens in Bergamo. They saw very high rates of death in that area. He has the mortality data to prove it. So was that just about inflating numbers? Well, no, that wouldn't, maybe account for some of it. But why didn't it spread to the rest of Italy? They were doing the same thing. They were incentivizing deaths in the rest of Italy. But as he pointed out, Italy warned everyone in the north, we're about to lock you down up there. We're so panicked that it caused everyone to jump on planes, trains, and automobiles and migrate south as quick as possible so they didn't get locked down in the north. And then we never saw this virus that's supposed to be sweeping the world. It didn't even move south. They didn't see the same numbers. It just all was located up in Bergamo. And he said, I can't explain what happened in the north in Bergamo, but I am telling you what I see in the numbers. Well, I ran into a doctor that believes he does know what happened in Bergamo, Dr. Pietro Gasparoni. You're about to hear the first time I've ever heard this information. It was a pretty mind-blowing moment. Take a look at this. My next guest is Dr. Pietro Gasparoni, and my understanding is you've had a lot of experience treating COVID vaccine injury. Is that correct?
esperienza di cura poca.
I study internal medicine, I practice internal medicine, and I endocrinologist. So I had these patients which experienced symptoms 2-3 weeks after having been injected by the vaccine, which had sometimes multiple diseases together, like infectious diseases, mononucleosis, COVID, herpes, cytomegalovirus, and even the Nile flu, for example, it happened to see. And I also witnessed many autoimmune diseases, especially arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, acute, and polymyalgia, and the spill diseases, spondylitis, and other diseases.
How do you explain a mechanism of a product, a vaccine, as you described it, causing patients to have multiple diseases at one time? Like Nile diseases and infections. How does he explain how that could happen?
Basically, when you get a vaccine, for the first 2 weeks, your system is low. So you're more at a risk of getting other diseases. And so this explains the situation in Bergamo during the first wave of the vaccine. Because of the COVID, because what had happened is that 2 young people had died in November 2019 of meningitis. And since they were young, people got scared, and they did this mass vaccination of meningitis combined with the flu vaccine, normal flu vaccine. And so 400,000 people received this vaccine between January and February 2020, where we had the COVID explosion. So it was during those 2 weeks where the immune system of all these people was low, that the COVID infection came in easily compared to other regions.
That, I think, is a mind-blowing statement. Was it possible that Bergamo happened because of a vaccine program? I actually remember when Wuhan, when China, people were first falling in the streets, we had floated a theory on the show that maybe they'd been injected with an experimental COVID vaccine they'd been working on that had side effects. What if, I remember saying, what if it had weakened their immune systems? Well, that never really played out. It was just a hypothesis that we were considering as we were trying to figure out what was going on. But I never heard this. I never heard that there was a meningitis scare exactly in the town where supposedly the bodies were being piled up from COVID, Bergamo. There it is. It's above Milan in the north of Italy. It was the hardest hit. It was where all the media came from. And so I rushed out of this interview and I called my investigation team, our international team of scientists and experts that look into these things. And I said, was there these teens getting meningitis at this time? I just heard this doctor give me this incredible statement. He has a hypothesis about what caused the giant uptick of death to Bergamo. He said there was meningitis cases, and then that forced the area to bring essentially a mandated meningitis vaccine. Well, here we found it. He talked about the 2 cases in November. Apparently there were several. By January 6th, we see this article, the 5th case of meningitis, a 16-year-old from Castelli Calepio in serious condition. Well, then was there then a reaction to that? This is the 5th case of meningitis reported just over a month in the Bergamo area of Lake Sabino. The infection has already claimed 2 lives in addition to Marzia Colosio from Pridor, a 19-year-old from Vilongo. Veronica Cadei died of the disease in early December. So there would be the cases November into December. The region and the local health authority have already established an emergency sanitary cordon to vaccinate the population and determine the cause of the infection, but public fear is growing. There it is. Panic. We have a vaccine. Everybody get out and get this meningitis vaccine right away we see this happen. And then, of course, we do see the media talking about this meningitis panic, queues and crowds at the Sarnico Health Authority for vaccinations. Vaccination will also be available on Sunday and Monday. The population is concerned after 4 cases in recent days. Look at that date, January 4th, 2020. Queues and crowds this morning as the ATS in Sarnico, a municipality in the province of Bergamo, overlooking Lake Iseo, to get vaccinated against meningococcus C, following the 4 cases of meningitis with 2 deaths detected in the last month in the lower Sabino area. The population was literally gripped by panic. The media did its job. It made everybody rush out to get the vaccine. The influx, which began at dawn, prompted Mayor Giorgio Bertazzoli to set up a civil protection presence tomorrow and Monday, starting at 6 a.m. to address the various problems encountered today. You have a mass vaccination program, and then all of a sudden, at that exact moment, people start dying of COVID. Did not hear that anywhere in the news. In fact, I think we all probably just discovered that together just now in this interview. I think about, my terrain theory folks out there that like to give me a hard time, and I am considering those things. I'm open to looking at science, but one of the things that they'll say is there is no contagion. The vaccine can't spread. The only way it spreads is when you get injected with it. I remember Tess Laurie recently saying, the vaccine is the pathogen. Well, what was in this vaccine? I don't know. We'll probably never know. Was it just a meningitis vaccine? Is it what the doctor said? Is it just the lowering of their immune system that caused them to have a dramatic response to what is a standard, regular cold virus in COVID? Or was there something else in the vaccine? I don't know. We won't know. But what we know is they wanted death. They needed death. They needed high rates of death. They knew the moment this happened, this was an opportunity to scare the world. And what happened for all of us? Lockdowns, masking, children's lives being taken away from school, people, losing their jobs, all while we waited for a year for a vaccine that could be forced upon all of us like a beautifully scripted film or ballet. But did it work? Did the vaccine actually end up protecting us? Was this a pandemic of the unvaccinated? So far, everyone in Italy is saying it's bullcrap, it's bullcrap. Every part of it you heard in America was not true from our perspective. But what about those mortality numbers? Do they tell us something? Do they give us an even greater insight into what was really happening in Italy? This is Trambusti again, describing a discovery that I think so completely proves that the vaccine kills. And not only that, it's not the unvaccinated that were dying, but that's what they told you. Listen to this.
And now we start speaking about vaccines. In Tuscany, my region, I'm from Florence, and many other regions of central and southern Italy, the excess mortality has been much higher in 2022 than in 2021.
Wow.
Okay, and also than 2020.
Okay.
So what happened in 2022? Because COVID deaths were going down.
Yes.
And excess death in those regions were going up. We have to investigate because they are not dying from COVID. There should be some other reasons. So then at that point, you start thinking that maybe the huge vaccine roll-up could have been a cause of those deaths. For me, just an hypothesis. I cannot prove that.
Is it safe to say that the COVID vaccine did not reduce the rising death rate?
Exactly. That's a fact.
Yeah, it was ineffective at stopping death rate.
Then there should be some other means, some other methods to establish a correlation between the increase of deaths during 2022 in many regions of Italy and the vaccine administration.
Yes.
That is beyond my expertise.
But what your work has disproved, really, is we hear that the COVID vaccine saved millions of lives.
No, that can't be true.
That can't be true.
No, that can't be true. That's in the numbers. That's in the numbers. And there's another important thing that it's not just the vaccine themselves. It's also what the government in Italy and many other parts of the world did, because I have a peer review publication on the autoimmunity magazine, international magazine, where I and other researchers proved that the trick of the 14 days is true. I explain myself better. In Italy, the deaths of everyone who died within 14 days after the vaccination was counted as unvaccinated.
Wow.
Okay, this is stated in the official documents of ISS, that is the Italian Institute of Medicine. So we have statistically proved that this trick has really been applied. So all the deaths in these 14 days have been misplaced into the wrong category, and this fact alone has created the theory of the pandemics of the unvaccinated.
Yes, something Joe Biden would say. All the leaders were saying this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, when they were really pointing to the danger of the vaccine, which is what was happening.
Yeah.
And then 14 days after vaccination, if you were having a bad reaction, it didn't blame the vaccine. In fact, it blamed the unvaccinated.
Yes, and what I saw looking the numbers is when, in coincidence with the vaccine roll-up of the age category, 40 to 50 or whatever, in coincidence with the vaccine roll-up, you have a peak of death in the unvaccinated.
Wow.
That cannot be.
So, as the vaccine rollout rolls up, all of a sudden, by the way, a year after most unvaccinated have probably already been in contact with COVID, we see a spike in death.
Yes, I'm speaking
in the
about
unvaccinated.
Yes, I'm speaking about 2021 towards spring, where the COVID deaths were going down. You have these spikes in age class unvaccinated people in coincidence with the roll-up of vaccine in that age class. So this is, we analyzed it.
I see. So to be clear, Italy rolled out requirements for different age groups. Like now this group is going to get the vaccine, and then you'd see that group, that age unvaccinated would spike.
Yes. Of course, because of the 14-day streak, that spike is not a spike in unvaccinated. It's factually in the vaccinated people, but is represented graphically in the unvaccinated people.
And you see this anomaly in the different age groups as they roll it out, which that's pretty good scientific evidence.
Yeah, and we have a peer review publication, the Autoimmunity magazine, where this data is published and be reviewed. And
when did that publish?
Months ago.
Folks, that is a barn-burning revelation right there. We have actually discussed some of these details using world data with our team, but I've never seen it as clearly stated as that. First of all, he says we have a problem. We have a real problem with this mortality data. The death rate is higher in 2022 when this thing's supposed to be over and COVID is going down. The death rate's higher than it is in 2021. And 2021 is higher than 2020 when we're supposed to believe this entire thing broke loose in Bergamo and everything got crazy and it was the worst part of the pandemic. That was the lowest part of deaths from the from doesn't matter. It was just the lowest rates of death. Every year, as we were supposed to now have a vaccine that works, suddenly we're dying at even higher rates. And so this idea, as I pointed out, I said to him, so when they say that we save millions of lives from the vaccine, he says that cannot possibly be true. I can't explain much, but I can tell you that that is not true because we should have seen the mortality go down. Instead, it kept going up. But then the realization of all realizations, he calls it the 14-day trick. And we reported on this to you. We told you, we were under this belief. We'd heard that they were, going to categorize inside the first 14 days after each vaccination that you were still considered unvaccinated. So if you died, if you had a reaction to that vaccine, which would obviously for most people happen inside that first 2 weeks, then that would immediately be put in the unvaccinated category. And so Italy did the same thing Joe Biden did in America. This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. It's the unvaccinated that are dying. And instead, what we now can tell from this data is the unvaccinated, the unvaccinated had nothing to do with it. It was the vaccinated being killed by the vaccine program. And then they were being labeled as unvaccinated. And honestly, you cannot prove it better than this. This is the point he makes. In Italy, they were very specific, as we were in America. We are going to now release the vaccine for the elderly from, let's say, 70 to 85 years old. Go out, get your vaccine. Then suddenly, for the next 14 days, the unvaccinated between the age of 70 and 85 all start spiking deaths. They're dying in the unvaccinated a year after this virus has been around. Then they change it. Then it obviously gets younger, from 50 to 65. Go out, get your vaccine. And then suddenly, the unvaccinated, the age of 50 to 65 for the next 14 days are dying, and they're calling them unvaccinated. I mean, folks, that is reproducible science. That is where if you were going to test as something dangerous, you would do that. You would have it enter for 14 days in a specific age group, and then that group starts suddenly, we see a rise in deaths. And to think that they called that unvaccinated, these people are diabolical. You cannot imagine really what they were up to or what matters. But now that we're talking about the injuries of the vaccine, the people that are dying from the vaccines, one of the biggest issues that we know, we've talked about it, myocarditis, pericarditis. I got to speak with a cardiologist, Dr. Giuseppe Barbaro, to see what was his experience in Italy. Sounds just like USA. Listen to this. When did you first start seeing a rise in myocarditis, pericarditis during COVID?
At the beginning of 2021, between December and March, I started to see the first myocarditis. Some of them manifested soon, others manifested much later. In 40% of cases, we can find some symptoms of a previous myocarditis, even 1 or 2 years after the manifestation. Magnetics can find a late gadolinium enhancement. This is a scale of myocardium and is an electric unstable area of the myocardium, which can generate fatal arrhythmias.
Is there specific age groups that were at higher risk?
Between 12 and 36 years old, under 14, especially in the males. The male sex, 40% are asymptomatic. And in the study of some specific medicine or so-called vaccines, but they are not vaccines. The fatality is much higher when this vaccine is given compared to the disease.
Vaccine makers, some mainstream medicine want to say that the virus itself, natural virus, causes more myocarditis and pericarditis than the vaccine. You do not agree?
There is a study which proves this fact wrong. It proves the opposite. Myocarditis has been proven to be found only exclusively in people who were vaccinated. And there was an Israeli study that proved that this increase of autoimmune protein, which is very similar to spike protein, which can give worsening cross effect.
All these conditions may cause a scar, even a micro scar in the myocardium. But these are electric area with electric instability.
Electric instability, yes.
And may cause malignant arrhythmias.
Tony Fauci and other scientists have said it's okay, it's mild myocarditis, it's mild pericarditis. Is there such a thing
Transient,
as mild?
transient, even transient. Transient, short period.
Yeah.
It's false. Absolutely. This is a wrong message to people. It's not true that natural infection may cause an increase in myocarditis. And even it has been published in different studies. The Japanese study on adverse effects database the Nordic study and other studies, but even in the clinical practice. We can observe the patients that did not develop a myocarditis after natural infection. On the contrary, myocarditis is a definite risk factor, recognized even by EMA in September 2022. And now we are trying to search excusation to justify, does it exist, mild myocarditis? Yes. Myocarditis is not mild. There's a new classification. There's never existed a mild myocarditis. Myocarditis is an acute damage of the myocardium. The scar can last even for years. I have a patient with myocarditis after 4 years of vaccination.
What about your peers? Certainly every cardiologist in Italy must also be seeing this increase. Are they agreeing? Is there agreement that this vaccine is causing it?
You don't have to fear the stormy sea when you bring out the truth, unless it gives a testimony.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I'm proud to give a testimony of the truth.
He's proud to give the testimony of the truth. At that screening that evening, some of the scientists and doctors that risked their careers, this guy has risked his career, doesn't care. They all stood up in front of the audience, giant audience, some vaccine injured, just cheering how these doctors and scientists stood for the Hippocratic Oath when the majority didn't. The majority around the world so disappointed, such a disappointing moment for medicine, for science. I guess it had to happen because so many of us are waking up to the fact that you just really can't trust your doctors. You can't trust your regulatory agencies. We can't hope that one of our doctors, one of these rare few that we're hearing from, actually represent the body that turns. They know, as he pointed out, they know it's causing myocarditis and pericarditis. He said, I believe anybody that knows anything about that's a heart doctor that works with the heart. You know what you're seeing, you know what you're looking at, you know where it's coming from. Well, speaking of those that are overlooked, of course, it's always the vaccine injured. And I sat down with several throughout this trip to hear their story because theirs is the most important story. They're the ones that are still dealing with this. They don't get to put COVID in their rearview mirror like the rest of us. Every day they have to look in the mirror and remember the biggest mistake they ever made in their lives was trusting their government, trusting their doctor. This is the voice of the vaccine injured. Take a look at this. My next guest is Emilia Padovano. She was injured by the COVID vaccine. You can see these beautiful photos of before and then after. It appears to be paralysis in her face, multiple photos of that. I want to thank you for sharing your story with us today.
I went to get the vaccine because in essential services like healthcare, we practically had a vaccination mandate from the very beginning. After the second dose, I started having many symptoms. Severe skin rashes on my shoulder, hives, and then I started having issues with my tongue, very fierce headaches, and during the night I started having electric shocks in my legs. The doctor told me to go immediately to the emergency room, and there I was diagnosed with very severe facial paralysis. Psychologically, I am still working on myself, because this is a condition that I still struggle to accept today.
Why are you in a wheelchair?
Because I can't even walk. My legs are hot. They burn all day and night. After the second dose of Pfizer, I started having severe problems with my right knee, and slowly it took over my whole body. Because of this illness, I lost my home, I lost my job. No longer having my health, I completely lost everything.
I am from Rome. I had vaccine damage due to the Moderna shot and had myocarditis within 13 hours after the vaccination.
How did you know it was myocarditis?
At first, I had a stabbing pain in my chest, as if I were having a heart attack. In Italy, unfortunately, the search for treatments was not easy, so I had to act as a guinea pig. I, like other damaged people, had to experiment with all those alternative therapies. In particular, a therapy worked for me that is incredible. We are talking about a synchro-frequency-based therapy that was studied and created by a researcher, which gave me positive effects.
Would you have gotten the vaccine if it wasn't required?
No, I did not want to take the vaccine. I used to play football at quite a good level at the age of 42. I was very healthy. I never had COVID, but I had to take it to earn money for my family. I got vaccinated in September 14th, 2021 in the morning, and then in the afternoon I got a high temperature. My arm, where I had the injection, was in pain, and then I couldn't feel it anymore. I had diarrhea, and my muscles were contracting. I immediately contacted the doctor, and the doctor applied a protocol, which told me to wait for a week at home and take paracetamol. My condition got worse. I got thrombosis and then pericarditis. I had neurological problems. One morning I got up and fell down, and I couldn't walk anymore. And it is like a small fiber neuropathy of the leg.
What do you think about Italy still recommends this vaccine for people?
I believe there should be freedom of choice, informed choice, and I had no information. If I were the authority, I would immediately stop it. I saw many other people who had the same problems.
It's really astounding, isn't it? This is the same story of Bree Dressen in America and React 19 and all of the injury stories that we've covered. How is it that every nation around the world just doesn't put two and two together? No doctor. We have no idea what's going on with you. We can't picture the thousands of you in every province lined up in your wheelchairs with the same pains throughout your body, an inability to walk, the symptoms the same. And the real Peter Marks, therealpetermarks.com. You can watch it yourself, where Peter Marks gets these testimonies straight to the head of the FDA that's supposed to be looking at injury, and he just turns the other way, as every health minister, as every nation did. Why? Because clearly they were told to. Clearly they knew this was an issue. Why didn't they want to know if the vaccine was safe? Why did that have nothing to do with this? So you're inflating the death numbers. You're destroying people's lives. You're killing people with myocarditis and pericarditis. You won't admit it. And you're putting them in wheelchairs. One thing's for sure, when they say they want to reduce population, most of these folks, whether you've been killed or you've been gravely injured and put in a wheelchair, don't think you're producing as many children on this earth anymore. But if each one of these doctors had amazing things to say about treating these people, about what they saw was happening in the world, just like many of the great scientists and doctors that have been on the stage of the high wire in America. It was exactly the same in Italy. I want to let Dr. Rosanna Negri in one more time. She's a neurologist. She talks about the fact that there are obviously prions involved in this and what is really going on here. It's amazing. Italy is the first country to really, China, we see this outbreak, but I think the world just thinks that's China. We don't see ourselves connected, at least not in America. But Italy was used to scare the world. Italy was the first after China.
It was a project.
It was a project.
Was, in my opinion, was a pilot project. Okay. It was decided before and planned with accuracy.
Decided and planned before with accuracy.
Of course, you should be blind for not see it clearly. And I think that, use the fear as an instrument of power. It was a tool held like the history. The power always used to scare people, to force to do what it should be unacceptable, like to give up to our freedom, like to give up our rights for what? for a paper that certificates that you are vaccinated, that is not vaccinated, it is other things, as you know already perfectly. I have not to explain, but it was I can do, because it was the first person in Europe to denounce the neurological side effects of COVID vaccine, named vaccine, included the graceful Jacob, that is like the crazy cow.
So like mad cow, Christoph Jakob disease.
Prior, yes, always. But
so you believe this COVID vaccine causes prions?
I don't believe, I'm sure, and I can prove it. It's quite different. And who gave the proof, the definitive proof, was the group of Luc Montagnier after his death, because they found in every vaccine, I have some difficulty to call it vaccine, but just to
I understand.
Just to understand, just to let us send to people.
Yes.
The COVID vaccine, they found in every vaccine the sequence of prionic sequence. So if this prionic sequence that is inside most the vaccine, of COVID vaccine, can provoke neurodegenerative disease, such as Alzheimer. I never saw an Alzheimer at 45 years. It was impossible. It was not possible.
And now you do.
Now I treat patients of 45 years, 50 years with Alzheimer disease, sclerosis laterale amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and that is a bomb clock timing, you know.
But why? What is the motivation to cause doctors to essentially inject and shorten lifespan?
Most of people will tell you that it's money. I don't think money is just a tool. Money is just a tool to buy.
Money, yes.
Money is just a tool to buy my colleagues, to buy politics, to buy people that I can define prostitutes.
Okay.
Okay. But the real motivation, in my opinion, was the control. The global control of the society, and what they want still to do. Control our society, not only with health politics, but financial politics, the food, what we eat. And in this way, they are like sociopathic that play to be God. I cannot make the names.
Yeah.
But we know them, right?
Yes.
Is the 4, 5, 6 family in the world that rule the world.
Do they feel like they have the controls that they want, that she's talking about there? I mean, I think she nailed it on the head. They want control of your body. They want control of everything in this world, every single one of us. It's not just America. It's not just Italy. Every nation in the world went along with this, except maybe Sweden. I hope to visit Sweden, actually. I realized on this trip in Italy that I'm not done reporting on COVID. I thought, you know, no one's really done an international investigation to get to the bottom of what happened all around the world. What was this? If we intend to stop it, then we have to know exactly what it was, what it is, and what they're planning next. So as a part of that journey, I'm going to be in Europe coming up. Just want to let you know that just about a week away, I'm going to be in Poland first. I'm going back to Rhode Island right now. I'm going to be there May 30th for the World Council for Health event there. You definitely want to check that out if you're in America. But then I'm in Poland June 5th through the 6th. I'm in France then June 6th through the 8th. And then June 20th through the 21st, I'm going to be in Japan. I definitely want to give a shout out to Zero Spike that made Italy happen. No, your donation dollars actually did not fund me to be in Italy, but all the work I brought here did. The film that they're all watching now and sharing with their friends is because of you. But Zero Spike is making the augmented NAC, which many people are having really great effect with. They're the ones that made it possible for me to be here. I want to give a shout out. And while I'm on that shout out, by the way, I had like the worst allergy attack in history, and they started handing me augmented NAC, and I have never had anything that got rid of my eyes swelled shut 2 days ago. I could not breathe. And I have to say, just as a personal testimony myself, I'm not selling it, don't own it. It's not sponsoring the High Wire, but it was very effective. I want to just sort of close up by saying that work that you make possible, this film, An Inconvenient Study, actually is affecting scientists and doctors. One of the great renowned doctors in Italy wanted to talk about how impressed he was, not just with the film, but the fact that we got the study done. And he is working to try and get a similar study done. He wants to do the Henry Ford study in Italy. Take a look at this. My next guest is Dr. Alberto Donzelli. This is the first doctor to say there was a problem. He has a degree specializing in preventative health and nutrition. And has done many studies on how to make people healthier. It is my honor and pleasure right now to be joined by Dr. Donzelli. Thank you for joining me.
Lieto. I would like to express my great appreciation for your An Inconvenient Study, because it really delved into the matter with critical analysis. If we can present these results of your study in all Italian regions, we would ask politicians, one, to discuss this topic scientifically, and then two, if they do not believe in the study that was carried out, to ask for a replication in Italy of a similar study. And this study should include people who think like me, for example. I'm not against vaccines, but also researchers who are in favor of the vaccine, so that there could be a real debate. And in the meantime, remove the mandatory obligation vis-a-vis such evidence of the vaccines and launch a randomized pragmatist study.
Why do you believe they're pushing back against questions of vaccines, against studies like the Henry Ford study? What is it about vaccinations that they don't want to allow medicine to have the debate?
They don't want because deep inside, they know that the arguments supported the narratives are weak, and the scientific debate would basically prove that they are wrong, and we do not want, let me be clear, to go on TV and say publicly saying all these things, but we are ready for a closed-door debate where politicians are a bit like the jury trial, and they should just listen and to the evidence that is suggested to them by both parties, and then make their conclusions on a scientific basis. That's what we are trying to do, and what we would like to do.
I want to once again just say this has been a spectacular trip here in Italy. It has felt really profound as I stood in front of the audiences. It was so brilliantly laid out there by a doctor saying this study is changing the world. So many people came up to me and thanked me. You are changing the world. You're changing Italy. And frankly, you know, I think to myself, I'm not doing anything. We have an amazing team of experts, scientists, lawyers in Aaron Siri and the work that he does, but none of this is possible without you. Not just donating, but also sharing this show. So how did Italy find out? Probably someone watching right now shared our show with a friend in Italy, and so many of them were saved throughout COVID. We actually do change the world one step at a time. Each one of us, that step that we take to stand in our truth. Every one of these doctors risk their careers to even tell this story. I'm sure some of them are nervous. What will happen now that I've been on the high wire? But as every one of them said in one way or another, there is only speaking the truth. Anything else is death. Anything else is certainly not the Hippocratic Oath which they signed. Deep down, we all have that oath. We should all live in that oath because the future for our children and our children's children is our responsibility. And if we are not speaking our truth, if we are not standing up, then the days of freedom, certainly in America and in every place around the world that considered itself free, those days are numbered. We are under attack. This hasn't gone away. New tools are coming in, and you know, AI and all of the different facial recognition softwares and the apps on our phones and the real ID, they're coming from every direction. We could hide, which just means we're going to stall the inevitable when they find us, or we can speak our truth and stop it. And that is what I feel really called to. I want to thank all of you for this opportunity to be here in Italy, to also be in France and Poland. One of our great sponsors of the High Wire asked me, you know, why are you going to Europe? Isn't this really about America? Shouldn't we be focused on our own issues? And what I said is, you know, America is a beacon of light and hope right now. It's one of the only nations that is pulled out of the WHO, out of the WEF, seems to be, you know, holding back the authoritarian takeover of the world as we watch the censorship happening on social media in Britain, in Europe. Nations are falling prey to the destruction of sovereignty by these globalist thinkers. But would you prefer that we be the only beacon of light and hope so that every vampire of the world knows what they need to attack? They're at our borders. They're pounding on our doors. They are smashing in our windows. I don't know that we survive if we're the last ones pushing back. Certainly, all we need is one election to turn this. One election that brings in a globalist. And we've had them already in office before. Where are we going to be the moment that happens? We want to have set precedents in courts for sure, but I also would love to see other nations pushing back. I would love to see an inconvenient study being shared amongst all Italians, amongst all the people in Poland, in France, in Germany, in Japan, where that's happening as we speak after a press conference last week. This is a fight for freedom for all humanity. I believe we are all God's children, not just those of us born in America. And if all God's children stand up together in mass and say, we are mad as hell and we're not going to take this anymore, that's the day the world changes. And that's the day we make it everyone's problem, not just America's. That's what this mission's all about. Let's change the world, shall we? It's been such an honor to have you be a part of this experience here in Italy. I'm going to have my last evening here before I head back to the States. Definitely want to see you at the Better Way Conference there in Rhode Island. So, ciao, buona noche. I love you. See you next week on The High Wire.